On October 24, 1944, 150 miles east of Luzon, radar screens aboard Task Group 38.3 flickered with incoming contacts. Commander David McCampbell, 34, stood on USS Essex's flight deck, watching mechanics push aircraft into launch positions. The carrier air group had logged over 18,000 combat hours since April. That morning's intercept would test a different equation. 2 F6F Hellcats against 60 Japanese aircraft. The strike force, land-based bombers and fighters from Luzon, bore down at 22 nautical miles. McCampbell's Hellcat, designated Mincy III, carried partial fuel. The scramble had been urgent. His wingman, Ensign Roy Rushing, 23, ran his engine checks beside him. In after-action reports, the mission would be logged as a 90-minute engagement. What radar operators saw unfold that morning rewrote single-sortie combat records. The last enemy aircraft turned away at 11:20 hours, never reaching the fleet. By dawn on October 20, 1944, General Douglas MacArthur had returned to Philippine soil at Leyte. Behind the amphibious force lay Vice Admiral Thomas Kincaid's 7th Fleet. Transports, escort carriers, and aging battleships configured for shore bombardment. Admiral William Halsey's 3rd Fleet, designated Task Force 38 when operating under Halsey's command, provided distant cover with 15 fast carriers. Commander David McCampbell's Air Group 15, embarked on USS Essex since late April, had become the strike arm for Rear Admiral Frederick Sherman's Task Group 38.3. The group included 4 carriers: Essex, Lexington, Princeton, and light carrier Langley, screened by cruisers and destroyers. Air Group 15 carried 90 aircraft, 49 F6F Hellcats, 15 SB-2C Helldivers, 15 TBM Avengers. Their operational tempo had been relentless since the Marianas campaign. Pilots averaged 20 sorties per week. Maintenance crews worked 18-hour shifts. McCampbell had taken command of Fighting Squadron 15 in September 1943, then assumed Air Group Command in February 1944. His path to this position had been circuitous. Commissioned from Annapolis in 1933, he'd spent a year unemployed during Depression-era force reductions before the Navy recalled him in 1934. Flight training came later. Wings earned at Pensacola in April 1938. He'd served as landing signal officer aboard USS Wasp until Japanese submarine I-19 torpedoed the carrier off Guadalcanal in September 1942. For the next year, McCampbell instructed other LSOs in Florida, far from combat. At 33, older than most fighter pilots, he'd finally gotten his chance to lead. His early gunnery scores had worried squadron members. 8% on qualification runs when 10 was minimum. Through repeated practice on towed sleeves, he'd improved to 15%, then 20%. By late May 1944, his shooting had become surgical. The morning of October 23rd brought submarine contact reports. USS Data had spotted Vice Admiral Takeo Kurita's center, force transiting the Siberian Sea. Battleships, cruisers, destroyers heading east towards San Bernardino Strait. Task Force 38 repositioned to intercept. On October 24th, 3 carrier groups operated east of the northern Philippines. Sherman's TG-38-3 held the northernmost position, responsible for striking Japanese airfields on Luzon to prevent land-based attacks on the invasion fleet. At 800 hours, Essex launched the first strike against Clark and Nichols fields. 47 aircraft departed. Hellcats, Helldivers, Avengers. McCampbell remained aboard, available for fleet defense. His Hellcat sat spotted on the flight deck, fueled for a standard combat air patrol. Radar operators in Essex's Combat Information Center tracked the outbound strike, watching screens for threats. They didn't wait long. At 0950 hours, green returns bloomed on radar scopes. Fighter Director Officer Lieutenant Commander John Connolly studied the formation. Multiple contacts, altitude stacked from 1,000 to 25,000 feet, bearing 280 degrees, range 22 miles, closing. He calculated intercept geometry while keying the radio. Vice Admiral Takejiro Onishi's 1st Air Fleet, based at Clark Field, had launched approximately 150 aircraft that morning in 3 waves of 50 to 60 planes each. The first wave now approached Task Group 38.3. Most of Essex's fighters were still airborne over Luzon or returning low on fuel. The flight deck held only 7 Hellcats in launch-ready condition. 6 could be airborne in 2 minutes. Deck crews sprinted to their positions. McCampbell climbed into Mincy III's cockpit. His crew chief called up fuel status. Tanks showed 60%. Standard procedure required topping off before launch, but time had run out. McCampbell acknowledged. Scanning instruments. Oil pressure steady at 60 psi. Manifold pressure normal. The Pratt & Whitney R2800 double wasp engine, 18 cylinders producing 2,000 horsepower, idled smoothly at 1,000 toes RPM. 650 caliber Browning machine guns, 3 per wing, were armed with 400 rounds per gun, 400 rounds total. McCampbell locked his shoulder harness and canopy. Rushing, in aircraft number 14, ran identical checks beside him. The remaining 5 Hellcats positioned behind them. Essex turned into the wind. Sea state moderate, wind 15 knots across the deck. The launch officer's arms circled overhead, faster and faster. McCampbell advanced throttle to full military power. 54 inches of manifold pressure, 2,700 RPM. The Hellcat strained against brakes. Launch signal dropped. McCampbell released brakes and the fighter accelerated down the wooden deck, tail lifting at 40 knots, main wheels breaking contact at 70. He retracted landing gear and climbed at 1,300 feet per minute. Rushing followed 8 seconds later. Within 90 seconds, all 7 Hellcats were airborne, forming up in a loose combat spread. Connolly's voice crackled through headsets, providing vectors. Bogies bearing 280 20 miles, Angels 15, McCampbell acknowledged. Banking west. The formation climbed toward 20,000 feet, using building cumulus clouds for concealment. 5 pilots would engage the bomber element, approximately 20 aircraft. McCampbell and Rushing would tackle the fighter escort, roughly 40 Mitsubishi A6M0s and Nakajima Ki V-43 Oscars. The mathematics were unforgiving. Standard doctrine called for 4-to-1 numerical advantage for attackers. These ratios were inverted. At 1,005 hours, McCampbell spotted the enemy formation at 15,000 feet. A dense gaggle of aircraft proceeding eastward in loose formation toward the American carriers. Records show the Japanese force consisted of land-based Navy and Army aircraft from multiple Luzon airfields, hastily assembled after radar detected the American carrier strikes that morning. Coordination among units was minimal. Fighter escorts flew close to their bombers rather than providing top cover. McCampbell studied their formation from 8,000 feet above, positioned between the enemy and the rising sun to preserve visual surprise. Rushing held station 500 feet to McCampbell's right. The 5 other Hellcats had peeled off to attack bombers. McCampbell keyed his radio. "We'll work the edges. I'll take right side, you take left. Dive, shoot, extend below, then climb back for position." Rushing acknowledged. The tactic was simple. Use altitude advantage for speed in the dive, make a single high-speed pass, avoid turning fights where the more maneuverable Zeros held advantage, then use the Hellcat's superior power and dive speed to disengage. The F6F Hellcat could dive at 420 knots. Zeros struggled past 380. In level flight, the Hellcat made 380 parité. The Zero managed 350. Small margins, but enough. McCampbell rolled inverted and pulled through, diving toward a Zero on the formation's right flank. Airspeed built rapidly, 250 knots, 300, 350. At 1,000 feet above the target, he rolled wings level and centered the gun sight's illuminated pipper on the Zero's engine cowling. Range 300 feet, closing. He pressed the gun trigger. 6 machine guns fired simultaneously, 100 rounds per second collectively, tracers painting a path to target. The Zero's wing root erupted in flame. McCampbell pulled up hard, sustaining 4 Gs, and extended below the formation's altitude. Engine temperature climbed, but remained within limits. He pushed throttle to war emergency power, 60 inches manifold pressure, and began a climbing turn back to altitude. Elapsed time, 20 seconds. First kill confirmed at 1006 hours. Rushing had mirrored the attack on the left side. His Zero fell away trailing smoke. The Japanese formation began to react, some fighters breaking off to investigate the threat above. McCampbell and Rushing continued the pattern: altitude, dive, shoot, extend, climb, working methodically around the formation's periphery. By 10-15 hours, McCampbell had downed 3 enemy aircraft. Rushing had claimed 2. The Japanese formation, now aware of the threat, began breaking apart. Some fighters turned to engage while others continued escorting bombers eastward. McCampbell's fuel gauge showed 40% remaining, enough for perhaps 30 more minutes of combat maneuvering. Ammunition counters read 1-800 rounds remaining. He needed to make every burst count. Discipline mattered more than aggression now. A Zero pulled up into McCampbell's dive path, pilot attempting a head-on pass. McCampbell held course, firing a 3-second burst. The Zero's canopy shattered. The aircraft snapped inverted and spun down. McCampbell's airspeed touched 400 knots in the dive. He pulled out at 8,000 feet, the Hellcat groaning under 6 Gs. Blood drained from his head. Vision narrowed. He eased back pressure slightly, and vision returned. Another climbing turn, this time to the north, repositioning for the next attack. The radio carried fragments of other battles. The 5 Hellcats engaging bombers reported multiple splashes. Sherman's other carriers had launched additional fighters, the sky filled with contrails and falling aircraft. McCampbell ignored peripheral distractions, focusing on his sector. A pair of Zeros orbited below, apparently confused about the attacker's location. McCampbell dove on the trailing aircraft, firing from 400 feet. The Zero exploded. He extended eastward, putting distance between himself and the survivors. Fuel now read 30%. Ammunition counters showed 1-200 rounds. McCampbell had been airborne 40 minutes, 25 in combat. Rushing called over radio. 4 splashed, ammo getting low. McCampbell acknowledged. They needed to maintain the pressure. Every minute delayed was another minute the bombers couldn't reach the fleet. He scanned the sky, looking for the next opening. An Oscar, the Army's Key 43 fighter, slightly less capable than the Zero but still dangerous, flew alone at 12,000 feet, apparently separated from its unit. McCampbell positioned above and behind, undetected. The Oscar pilot never saw him. A 2-second burst. 5th kill at 10:23 hours. Records later confirmed that by this point, the Japanese strike force had become completely disorganized. Bombers scattered. Fighter escorts fixated on survival rather than escort duties. Not a single enemy aircraft penetrated to attack the carriers. The engagement continued for another hour, though combat intensity varied. McCampbell and Rushing stalked isolated aircraft, applying the same methodical pattern: position for advantage, dive with speed, fire-controlled bursts, extend away, reposition. Neither pilot allowed himself to be drawn into sustained turning engagements. The Hellcat's advantages lay in speed, power, and ruggedness, not agility. McCampbell had learned this during training and drilled it into his squadron. "Never dogfight a Zero," he'd told pilots repeatedly. "Hit and run, use your strengths." At 10:35 hours, McCampbell downed his 6th aircraft, another Zero attempting to reform the scattered fighter group. His fuel gauge now showed 20%, approaching critical decision time. Ammunition counters read 800 rounds remaining. He calculated endurance, 20 minutes of fuel at combat power, perhaps 30 at cruise settings. The return flight to Essex would take 15 minutes at cruise power. That left 5 to 10 minutes of combat time before he'd need to disengage. He decided to continue. Rushing remained on station, though he'd reported his ammunition nearly exhausted. Together they continued pressing the Japanese formation, preventing any reorganization. At 10:42 hours, McCampbell splashed his 7th, an Oscar that had been attempting to shepherd several bombers eastward. The bombers, now unescorted and under attack from other American fighters, scattered and turned back toward Luzon. Fuel warning light illuminated at 10:48 hours, 15% remaining, approximately 15 minutes of flight time. McCampbell keyed his radio. "Roy, we need to think about heading home," Rushing acknowledged. McCampbell made one final climbing turn, scanning for targets of opportunity. 2 Zeros flew in loose formation at 10,000 feet, heading west. McCampbell dove, Rushing following. He lined up on the trailing Zero, fired a 4-second burst, longer than optimal, but fuel constraints meant this was his last chance. The Zero's right wing separated. The aircraft tumbled. 8th kill at 10:50 hours. Rushing engaged the second Zero, but his guns fired only briefly before going silent. Ammunition exhausted. The Zero escaped. McCampbell had perhaps 400 rounds remaining. He made a final scanning turn. One more Zero, alone, at 8,000 feet. McCampbell calculated fuel, distance, time, marginal. He rolled into the dive. The Zero never maneuvered. McCampbell fired his remaining ammunition. The Zero's fuselage disintegrated. 9th kill, 10:52 hours. His guns were empty. Fuel gauge read 10%. McCampbell leveled at 5,000 feet and turned east toward the fleet, 140 miles distant. He reduced power to maximum cruise, while 800 RPM, 32 inches manifold pressure, balancing fuel economy against time. The Hellcat's fuel consumption at this setting was approximately 80 gallons per hour. His remaining fuel totaled perhaps 12 gallons. Flight time, 9 minutes. Distance to Essex, approximately 60 miles at 240 mph airspeed. Required flight time, 15 minutes. The mathematics were unforgiving. Rushing formed on his wing. Both pilots flew in silence, conserving concentration for navigation and fuel management. McCampbell descended to 2,000 feet, where denser air improved propeller efficiency slightly. Every moment mattered. He leaned the fuel mixture to the edge of safe operation, accepting rough engine running for extended range. Cylinder head temperatures climbed toward redline. He adjusted cowl flaps, balancing cooling against drag. At 11:05 hours, Task Group 38.3 appeared on the horizon. 4 carriers, cruisers, destroyers arranged in circular formation. McCampbell called Essex's air operations frequency, requesting immediate recovery. The response was negative. Flight deck fouled by launching aircraft for another strike. Alternative, USS Langley, light carrier CVL-27, had a clear deck. McCampbell acknowledged an altered course. Langley lay 3 miles north of Essex. Fuel gauge now read 5%. Warning light flashed urgently. Rushing landed first, trapping aboard Langley at 11:12 hours. McCampbell entered the landing pattern, watching his fuel gauge. He'd trained as a landing signal officer. He understood carrier approaches intimately. Gear down, flaps to landing position, speed 85 knots. On final approach, engine RPM fluctuated briefly. Fuel starvation. McCampbell added power, and the engine responded. He caught the number 3 wire at 11 to 14 hours. The Hellcat jerked to a halt in 100 feet. McCampbell advanced throttle to taxi forward, following the deck crew's signals. The engine coughed once, twice, then died completely. Fuel exhaustion. Deck crew manually pushed Mincy III out of the landing area. Recorded flight time, 84 minutes. Time in combat, approximately 70 minutes. McCampbell shut down electrical systems and unstrapped. His hands shook slightly. Adrenaline aftermath. He climbed from the cockpit, legs stiff from tension. Deck crew swarmed the aircraft, chocking wheels and securing the airframe. Langley's maintenance chief, a weathered chief petty officer named Henderson, approached McCampbell as he stepped off the wing. Henderson had been examining the aircraft while McCampbell completed shutdown procedures. "Sir, you want to see this?" Henderson led McCampbell to the starboard wing, pointing to the ammunition bay access panel. He unlatched the panel. Inside, 2 .50 caliber rounds remained in the feed chute. Henderson checked the other 5 guns. Empty. 1,200 rounds expended, Henderson said. "You shot this bird dry." Rushing joined them, removing his flight helmet. His face showed exhaustion and exhilaration. "How many did you get, Skipper?" McCampbell had been counting mentally during the engagement. 9 confirmed, maybe 2 probables. "You?" Rushing grinned. 6 confirmed, and I watched you get most of yours. It's going to be 9. Easy. McCampbell nodded. They walked toward Langley's Island superstructure for debriefing. The carrier's air operations officer, Lieutenant Morrison, met them with clipboards and forms, standard post-mission protocol, estimated time of each engagement, enemy aircraft types, altitude, heading, observed results. McCampbell and Rushing worked through the sequence methodically, reconstructing the combat from memory. Records officer noted each claim, requesting confirmation from other sources. The 5 other Essex Hellcats had been watching McCampbell and Rushing from their attack positions against the bombers. Their reports would corroborate. Fighter Direction Officer Connolly's radar tracks would provide timing. Gun camera film, if functional, would supply visual evidence. Morrison compiled the preliminary report. Commander David McCampbell, 9 enemy aircraft destroyed. Ensign Roy Rushing, 6 enemy aircraft destroyed. Combined total for the 2 aircraft section, 15 confirmed. For the entire 7 aircraft flight, 27 enemy aircraft destroyed, with the bomber element prevented from reaching task group 38.3. The report reached Essex by signal lamp within 20 minutes. Admiral Sherman read it twice, then ordered verification through all available sources. By 1300 hours, multiple corroborating reports had arrived. Fighter Direction confirmed 15 distinct radar contacts disappearing from screens in the sector where McCampbell and Rushing operated. Returning pilots from other carriers reported witnessing portions of the engagement. Gun camera film from Mincy III, when developed, showed sequential firing passes on 9 separate targets. The claim was solid. McCampbell had achieved the highest single mission total in U.S. naval aviation history. The previous record, 7 aircraft in 1 mission, had been his own, set on June 19th during the Marianas Turkey shoot. At 1400 hours, an Essex motor whaleboat arrived at Langley to retrieve McCampbell and Rushing. Both pilots transferred to Essex for full debriefing with Air Group 15's intelligence officer. The 20-minute boat ride across moderate seas gave McCampbell time to process the mission. His flight suit was soaked with sweat despite the Pacific air temperature. He'd consumed nothing during the 84 minutes airborne, no water, no food. His mouth felt like sand. Dehydration and fatigue were setting in. Rushing, younger and more resilient, appeared less affected, though he sat quietly during the boat ride, lost in his own thoughts. Aboard Essex, flight deck crew greeted McCampbell with unusual attention. Word had spread through the ship. The Commander Air Group had just rewritten the record books. McCampbell deflected congratulations, asking only for water and a few minutes to clean up before debriefing. The crew directed him to Air Group 15's ready room, where coffee and sandwiches waited. McCampbell ate mechanically while reviewing his own mental notes. Intelligence debrief required precision, altitude, heading, aircraft type, observed damage, time of engagement. Every detail mattered for combat assessment and tactical analysis. The intelligence officer, Lieutenant Commander Wilson, conducted the formal debrief at 14:30 hours. McCampbell walked through each engagement chronologically, describing positioning, approach, firing solution, and result. Wilson recorded everything in precise language for the after-action report. The report would go to Commander Air Group 15, then Essex's commanding officer, then Sherman, then ultimately to Admiral Halsey and Admiral Nimitz. Every engagement in Task Force 38 generated documentation. This one would generate more than most. What made the difference today? Wilson asked after completing the formal sequence. McCampbell considered the question. Altitude advantage, initially. Connolly gave us perfect vectors to position above them. After that, discipline. We stuck to the plan. Didn't get drawn into turning fights, used speed and power, not agility. And ammunition discipline. Every burst counted. He paused. Also, the Japanese were poorly coordinated. They weren't flying mutual support. Once we started picking off aircraft, they got defensive instead of aggressive. That opened opportunities. Wilson noted McCampbell's assessment. Tactical analysis mattered for future engagements. If the pattern held, poor Japanese coordination, defensive reactions, other caps could exploit similar advantages. Wilson filed the completed report at 15:30 hours. By 1600 hours, copies had reached Flagstaff. Admiral Sherman read the report in his flag plot aboard Lexington. He noted the fuel status at recovery, completely exhausted, with McCampbell's engine failing on deck. Risk assessment. McCampbell had pushed beyond normal safety margins to continue engaging enemy aircraft. Result, prevented any bomber from reaching the carriers, potentially saving hundreds of American lives and preventing damage to capital ships. Sherman authorized a commendation for the mission. He also noted the tactical efficiency, 2 fighters disrupting a 60-aircraft strike force by targeting the escort fighters first. Standard doctrine emphasized bombers as primary targets. McCampbell's reversal of priorities had proven effective. Sherman directed his operations officer to disseminate the tactical lesson throughout Task Force 38. Combat operations continued through the afternoon. Essex launched additional strikes against Japanese forces in the Sibuyan Sea, where carrier aircraft were pummeling Kurita's center force. Battleship Musashi, under concentrated attack, would sink that evening after absorbing 19 torpedo hits and 17 bomb hits. The Battle of Leyte Gulf was escalating across multiple zones. Sibuyan Sea, Surigao Strait. Later, off Samar, Air Group 15 would fly dozens more sorties over the next 48 hours, but October 24th's morning engagement remained the standout. By 1800 hours, preliminary loss reports arrived. Task Group 38.3 had lost light carrier Princeton to Japanese air attack earlier that day. A single bomb hit penetrated the hangar deck, triggering fires and magazine explosions that eventually forced abandonment. Cruiser Birmingham, alongside Princeton fighting fires, suffered heavy casualties when Princeton's magazine detonated, 233 killed, 426 wounded. Against this loss, the successful defense of the task group by McCampbell and others took on additional significance. If the 60 aircraft strike McCampbell intercepted had reached the carriers, losses might have been catastrophic. McCampbell attended evening mess in the wardroom but left after minimal eating. Exhaustion was overwhelming him. He returned to his cabin, stripped off his flight suit and collapsed on his bunk. Sleep came immediately. His body needed recovery. Tomorrow would bring more missions, more combat. Air Group 15's operational tempo wouldn't slacken until the Battle of Leyte Gulf concluded, still 3 days away. But tonight, for a few hours, McCampbell could rest. On October 25th, McCampbell flew 3 additional sorties, coordinating Air Group 15's strikes against Kurita's forces approaching through San Bernardino Strait. He didn't add to his total. His role as KG required tactical oversight rather than freelance hunting. Other pilots in VF-15 continued scoring. By October 26th, when the battle concluded, Air Group 15 had accumulated significant additional claims, but the October 24th mission remained unique. No American pilot before or since has matched 9 confirmed kills in a single sortie. The record stood for the remainder of World War II and remains unbroken today. The official citation for McCampbell's Medal of Honor, presented by President Franklin Roosevelt in January 1945, specifically cited both the June 19th and October 24th, 1944 engagements. The October 24th citation read, "During a major fleet engagement with the enemy on October 24th, Commander McCampbell, assisted by but 1 plane, intercepted and daringly attacked a formation of 60 hostile land-based craft approaching our forces, fighting desperately, but with superb skill against such overwhelming air power. He shot down 9 Japanese planes and, completely disorganizing the enemy group, forced the remainder to abandon the attack before a single aircraft could reach the fleet. By November 18, 1944, Air Group 15 rotated off Essex, replaced by Air Group 4. The squadron had completed 7 months of continuous combat operations. Final statistics: 312 enemy aircraft destroyed in aerial combat, 348 destroyed on the ground, nearly 300,000 tons of enemy shipping sunk or damaged. 26 pilots in VF-15 achieved ace status, 5 or more confirmed kills. McCampbell led them all with 34 aerial victories, the highest total of any US Navy pilot in history. 7 pilots became ace in a day, 5 kills in a single mission. McCampbell achieved this distinction twice, the only naval aviator to do so. The squadron departed aboard USS Bunker Hill for Pearl Harbor, arriving November 29th. From there, they returned to the continental United States, reaching Bremerton, Washington on December 6th. The war would continue for 9 more months. Air Group 15 would not return to combat. In after-action analysis, tactical officers examined what made McCampbell's mission successful. Several factors emerged. First, altitude advantage at initial contact allowed energy dominance throughout the engagement. Second, target prioritization. Engaging fighter escorts prevented them from protecting bombers, which other American fighters then destroyed without opposition. Third, tactical discipline. McCampbell and Rushing avoided the Hellcat's weaknesses, exploiting only its strengths. Fourth, ammunition conservation. Controlled bursts rather than sustained firing maximized limited rounds. Fifth, teamwork. The 2 pilots operated as a coordinated team, covering each other while maintaining separation. Records officer noted one additional factor in his analysis. McCampbell's experience as a landing signal officer had taught him patience and judgment under pressure. LSOs stood on carrier decks, guiding aircraft to landing through hand signals. The job required instant assessment, clear communication, and acceptance of risk. A single mistake could kill a pilot. McCampbell's 3 years as LSO had refined these qualities. In combat, they manifested as calm decision-making and precise execution. Historians later studied the engagement for insights into fighter tactics. The October 24th mission appeared in post-war training curricula at the Navy Fighter Weapons School and later at the Top Gun program. The tactical principles remained valid through jet age. Maintain energy advantage, exploit your aircraft's strengths, avoid opponent's strengths, conserve ammunition, fly as a team. Technology changed. Principles endured. McCampbell's aircraft, Mincy III, returned to combat after his rotation stateside. The Hellcat flew with subsequent air groups until Essex returned to the United States in 1945. The aircraft was eventually scrapped. Today, a replica painted to match Mincy III's markings, including 34 Japanese flags beneath the cockpit, is displayed at the National Naval Aviation Museum in Pensacola. Visitors can see the same aircraft type McCampbell flew on October 24, 1944, though not the actual airframe. The real Mincy III, like most World War II aircraft, didn't survive. Only records and photographs remain. In official Navy histories, the mission appears as Interception of Enemy Strike Force, 24th of October 1944, Philippine Sea, 9 confirmed, single mission, American record. The entry is brief, the implications were not. David McCampbell continued serving after World War II. He commanded the oiler USS 7 in 1959, then aircraft carrier USS Bonhomme Richard from 1959 to 1960. He served on the Joint Chiefs of Staff and in various staff positions, rising to captain before retiring in 1964 with 31 years of service. He settled in Florida where he'd grown up. Interviews in later years revealed a man who viewed October 24, 1944 as extraordinary circumstances met with straightforward application of training and tactics. "We did what we were trained to do," he told one interviewer. "The situation gave us opportunities. We took them." Ensign Roy Rushing, McCampbell's wingman that day, continued flying through war's end. He achieved 10 confirmed victories total, earning ace status. After the war, he left active duty and pursued a civilian career. He maintained contact with McCampbell occasionally. Both men attended Air Group 15 reunions when health permitted. Rushing passed away in 1999. McCampbell died in 1996 at age 86. Both are buried at Arlington National Cemetery. The Battle of Leyte Gulf, in which the October 24th engagement formed one small part, decisively broke Japanese naval power. Kurita's center force, despite reaching Samar on October 25th, withdrew without destroying the invasion fleet. Nishimura's southern force was annihilated in Surigao Strait. Ozawa's northern force, the decoy carrier group, was destroyed off Cape Engano. Japanese losses: 4 aircraft carriers, 3 battleships, 10 cruisers, 9 destroyers, and approximately 300 aircraft. American losses: 1 light carrier, 2 escort carriers, 2 destroyers, 1 destroyer escort, and approximately 200 aircraft. The Imperial Japanese Navy never again mounted major fleet operations. The Philippine campaign continued for months, but naval supremacy belonged to the United States. McCampbell's contribution to this victory was measured not in strategic impact, one mission among thousands, but in tactical perfection and human courage. When records mattered, his name stood first: U.S. Navy Ace of Aces, single mission record holder, Medal of Honor recipient. The numbers told one story. Those who flew with him knew another. In 2002, the Navy commissioned USS McCampbell, DDG-85, an Arleigh Burke-class guided missile destroyer. The ship carries the name into modern naval operations, a connection between World War II's aerial combat and 21st century warfare. Technology has changed fundamentally. The principles McCampbell demonstrated, tactical excellence, courage under pressure, mission focus, remain constant. Every naval aviator learns his name during training. The specifics of the October 24th mission appear in case studies. What endures from that morning is not merely the record, though the record matters. What endures is the demonstration that impossible odds yield to skill, preparation, and determination. McCampbell and Rushing faced 60 aircraft with 2. Standard doctrine would have called this suicide. They treated it as a tactical problem requiring systematic solution, altitude, position, discipline, ammunition conservation, team coordination, each element executed correctly. The result, 15 enemy aircraft destroyed, 45 turned back, 0 American carriers damaged. The mathematics reversed. In McCampbell's personnel file, the mission appears as one line in a career summary. In Air Group 15's war diary, it occupies 3 pages of typed report. In official Navy history, it receives a paragraph. These compressed records conceal the reality of 90 minutes at 20,000 feet, fuel gauge dropping, ammunition running out, enemy aircraft filling the sky, knowing that failure means shipmates die. Records compress time. They cannot capture. Time's weight. On November 6, 2025, 81 years after the mission, researchers can still access the original documents, after-action reports filed by McCampbell and Rushing, fighter direction transcripts, radar plots, gun camera film, fuel consumption data, ammunition expenditure logs, every detail preserved in National Archives boxes, each page evidence of one morning when 2 pilots changed combat records. The file closes with a simple note from Admiral Halsey to Admiral Nimitz, dated October 26, 1944. McCampbell's performance 24th October exceeds any single mission achievement this war. Recommend highest recognition. Bureaucratic language. Behind it lay awareness that some missions define not just outcomes, but possibilities. The record showed what could be done. Every naval aviator after learned from it.